everybody, and a very warm welcome back to the latest episode of Hidden Jewels of Soul and Disco. I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. As you can see, there's a lot of space behind my back. I'm getting a new record shelf, and after getting all the records out, after putting my shelf down and putting it into storage, I came to the conclusion that I don't want to move ever again in my life. This was some pretty heavy lifting, and that's not the best part about record collecting, I tell you that, but I was really impressed. There was so much weight in my old IKEA Kallax. I was really impressed that this shelf could handle it all. Of course, I had it mounted to the wall, but I once again was impressed by that. Anyway, this week we are featuring.
Hi there, this is Gene Townsel, and to those of you who don't know me, I'm a native of Deerfield Beach whose musical roots sprouted right here into an international career as a singer, composer, and arranger.
Why Gene's debut album wasn't a can for 3 years, and why it became a collector's item even if there was demand when it was released, well, we'll discuss this after some needle drops.
We'd all try to win, yeah. Walk away if it were you, hey baby, hey now baby. Oh, your love from me, look out now baby, life is like a maze.
Gene's musical career began in Jacksonville, Florida. He is the grandson of a Baptist preacher, so you can imagine that he has a very tight and close relationship to gospel music. In 1963, he decided to become a professional musician and go into the mainstream market. He became backing singers for Lou Rawls, Dusty Springfield, and Ray Charles, just to name a few. In 1975, he had the opportunity to record his own first debut album, which he produced himself. And also the musicians who were taking part in the recording sessions were handpicked by him. He had a tremendous amount of connections in the music business. On guitar, you have Mark Silverman, who was his regular guitar player. On the drums, there is Raymond Pounds, who was the drummer of Stevie Wonder. So you can imagine that musically and vocally, this is a tremendously good album. It was also recorded at the Ray Charles Tangerine Studios and mastered at Sun West Studios. So all in all, studio-wise, production-wise, actually nothing could go wrong. But it did. And I found a newspaper article which was written by Colin Dilnott for the UK-based magazine Togetherness. Unfortunately, it was a very short-lived magazine. Finding these issues today is very difficult. They are very rare out there. But I found the actually article which Colin wrote about Gene and where he talked with Gene. This is the only interview in existence where Gene talks about his time in the 70s. So once again, a big thank you to Dave for the voiceover for this. You will hear the article now, which features footage from Gene on the stage in the late 70s or early 80s. So let's hear the story of Gene Townsel.
As written by Colin Dilnott and published in the United Kingdom magazine Togetherness, during the early 1970s, he had been accumulating songs which became the basis for the Time Wounds All Heals album. He recorded the album in 1975 at Ray Charles's Tangerine Studios and mixed at Sun West Studios. He used David Braithwaite, the regular RPM engineer, because Gene respected his expertise from working with him in the past. Gene produced the album himself and contracted the musicians through his extensive contacts over the years. One of the rhythm section players was Raymond Pounds, Stevie Wonder's drummer, and Gene used his own regular guitar player, Mark Silverman. I asked Gene why the album was not released in 1975. We kept finding that we were running into walls. It was a dog-eat-dog kind of business. We had all B kind of propositions. We'll hook you up, but we have to have all the publishing. But we were not interested in that. The years drifted by, and the album remained in the can, but in 1978 things were about to get worse. Gene heard about a company called Dobre that took recording projects from a friend called Roy Porter, who was a jazz drummer. Unknown to Gene, Dobre was a tax shelter for a mysterious company called Expression Sound Inc. They didn't want the project to be successful, but it started making a lot of noise in LA, and I think it scared them to death because they wanted to lose money and not make it, commented Gene. Gene was working out in Mexico in 1978 when it was issued. The most frustrating thing that I can remember was being in Acapulco for 6 to 8 weeks, and I was doing quite well, and, I needed product, and I was calling back to LA. Look, can you ship stuff because people want to buy the album, and I never got a record. They kept giving me all kinds of stories about back orders and this and that was my first real revelation about what was going on, and then I went back and found out. So, if you had ever wondered why the album is rare, then it is so because very few were pressed because it was not supposed to sell. To this day, Gene still hasn't got a copy, though he does still have the master tapes. Strangely enough, Dobre did release I'm Walking Away and There's No Use Hiding on 45. These releases were actually chosen by Gene, and he is proud that his 2 picks are the 2 tracks, which have been played on the rare soul scene over the years. Gene was also able to clear up the confusion over where the album says, Gold Star, this is definitely incorrect and should read Tangerine. Gene had supplied the tapes to Dobre, and he thinks they may have pressed the album at Gold Star. Gene talked me through the songs off the album. Time Wounds All Heals was written in the early 1970s using lyrics written by Ruth Heyman. He was going through a divorce in 1971, and the lyrics fitted with what was happening in his life at that time, and he told me, If You Were Really My Woman spoke for itself. He told me that he got the idea for the song Chrissy from a woman who used to come back to my shows in Southgate who I became pretty good friends with, and she lost her daughter who was only 4 or 5 years old when she died, and she was always torn by that. She was a really great fan, and I told her that one day I would sit down and try to write the things you have laid on me about the way you feel, and I'm going to try and put those feelings in a song one day. Gene went on to say, the song I'm Walking Away was kind of interesting in that I was dating a girl, and it was one of those kind of things where, she was kind of dogging me out. She was not exactly doing me right, okay? So I was telling her one day, you are really cold-blooded. She said, if you did to me what you say I'm doing to you, I would have walked away from you a long time ago. I said, you're right. And on the way home, that hook stayed in my head, and that night I wrote that song. It is a dance floor classic with great drumming from Raymond Pounds and nagging guitar from Mark Silverman, and one of the main reasons for the demand of the album. Gene included 2 Bill Withers tunes on the album, Hope She'll Be Happier and I'm Her Daddy. Gene says, I always loved Bill Withers' songs because they went straight to the point and there was nothing pretentious about them, and I love his tone. He did some good stuff. Gene was persuaded to do Color Me Black because Vic Werner, who was one of Gene's first managers, wrote the lyrics, a frustrated songwriter according to Gene. Gene felt it was appropriate to include the song Impossible Dream because philosophically, he felt he was always fighting against the odds, though he didn't use it in the stage show because of the gospel arrangement he gave. It didn't fit the show. There's No Use Hiding came to him because of his experience with relationships, and he felt people are not transparent enough because they just hide from each other, and that was his attempt to reflect that. This is another highlight of the album with its great string arrangement, which was written by Gene using musicians he contracted. Gene used several good friends on the background vocals. Brenda Redman, who was a soloist at Lewis Metropolitan CME Church in Los Angeles, where Gene was director. Blondell Jones, a close friend from Florida who Gene had known from his college days. And the late Peter Bryant, who Gene said had a fabulous voice. The final singer was Clyden Jackson, who was also an accompanist for the Lewis Choir. Gene and Clyden were very good friends, and Gene says, "We had a fabulous sound because our voices just loved each other, and we had a great blend, but between our two ambitions, we didn't really do much together." Her voice can be heard on "Daddy Don't You Walk So Fast." After the disappointment of the album, Gene became disenchanted and focused his career on live performances, which continued to take him all over the world. All through the 1980s, he toured and only gave it up when performing was no longer fulfilling. He started to look for something which was more spiritually fulfilling, and influenced by Ron Canale's gospel performances, he turned to gospel full-time. While still on the road, he wrote a piece based on Psalm 23, which got played by various choirs around the USA, and the success of this led him into the gospel arena.
So what a fascinating story Gene's story is. And this is his debut album. If you want to have it on vinyl, unfortunately, you have to pay around $400 because it has never been reissued on vinyl. You can get it on CD, you'll find it on Spotify, but you won't find it on vinyl. And it's a crying shame. So once again, vinyl me please, Ryan or whoever's out there, maybe this would be a chance to do a proper reissue of this really great album. Let's have a look at that album. So this, as you can see, is the front. I love this picture. It's a stunningly picture. This is the back, and there are two tracks I want to point out to you. And this is Hope She'll Be Happier, which was originally done by Bill Withers. Beautifully, beautifully done. I prefer Gene's version over Bill's. There's No Use in Hiding. What a great song this is, which was also written by Gene. And Color Me Black is an absolutely standout track from this album. So if you see it somewhere in the wild and the budget fits to you, go and grab it. I promise you, you won't be disappointed with this record. So Gene was doing appearances. People were asking for the album. Up to this day, he's not having an original copy of this album. So you can imagine you are at the height of your possibilities and people keep asking for the record, but there is actually no record to sell because the label doesn't want you to be successful. Wow. So Gene kind of stepped out of the mainstream music market and got back into gospel. And by 1985, he released his second album, which was called Gene Townsel and the Choral Connection, the 33rd Psalm, which you can also find. It only released one version, a great sounding record. So yeah, what happened after that with Gene? Well, he became a vocal teacher. He's a very strong figure in the choir, in the gospel choir segment, very well known. He gives courses to people who want to improve their voices and all of this. But honestly, I think it's a crying shame that Gene is not getting the recognition he should have for this soul masterpiece. So once again, all I can say, I promise you, you won't be disappointed if you click this album at Spotify and listen to it. It's an absolutely stellar recording. And once again, if you see it in the wild, go and grab it if it's price-wise working. All right, here is the record. Here is the record. So here we have, I hope you can see that. Side 1, this is side 2. I had a tremendous luck of finding a copy still in shrink for a very reasonable price. But what's been asked for this at the moment, that's horrible. Maybe the price is going down and you'll find one. But give Gene a chance. He very much deserves it. Next week we will be having episode 100, and you're up for a very great surprise on this. I hope you enjoy that episode as well. So all I can say is stay safe, stay healthy, listen to good music. Maybe Gene. Please try Gene. Put him on Spotify. You'll find his clips on YouTube and have a listen to his vocals. He's just fantastic. And I'll see you next time. Bye.